All right, welcome. Think of this as our very own visual study guide, where we're going to break down the incredible and sometimes confusing social and emotional world of a young child. Let's jump right in. So, let's start with a really big question, maybe the biggest question. How does a little kid, who's basically a bundle of feelings and impulses, turn into a unique person? Someone who can make friends, understand themselves, and figure out their place in the world. That's going to be our guiding star for this whole thing. So here's our game plan. We'll start inside the child's mind, talking about the emerging self. Then we'll get into how they figure out big ideas like gender and identity. After that, we'll tackle emotions, what they feel and how they learn to manage them. Then we'll zoom out to their social lives with play and peers. And we'll wrap it all up by looking at the huge role that parents and a sense of morality play. Okay, first up, we're diving straight into the heart of what it feels like to be a little kid. We're talking about a core conflict that the great psychologist Erik Erikson identified, this constant push and pull between taking initiative and feeling the weight of guilt. It really boils down to two sides of the same coin. On one side, you've got initiative. This is that new spark where a kid wants to do things, to have a plan, to make something happen. But on the other side, you've got guilt, and that can creep in when their big plans get shot down or when what they want to do bumps up against what someone else wants. So, initiative sounds a little abstract, right? What does it actually look like in the wild? Well, this is it. It's not just messing around. This play has a purpose. This little one is taking on a role. They have a goal: vacuuming the floor. This is how they test out ideas, explore what it's like to be a grown-up, and literally build their sense of who they are. And just to make this super clear, initiative, that's an inside job. It's coming from inside the child's own head, from their own wants and ideas. Guilt, though, that's a social thing. It happens at the crossroads of what I want and what the world, or my parents, will allow. The major task of this age is figuring out how to balance those two things. Okay, so as this little person starts to develop their sense of self, they naturally begin to sort the world into categories. And, a huge piece of that puzzle is gender. How do they figure that out? Well, this doesn't just happen overnight. It's a process, and it happens in pretty predictable stages. By about 2.5, a kid can usually say, I'm a boy or I'm a girl. Then, between 3 and 5, you often see those really strong preferences for so-called boy toys or girl toys. But the real breakthrough, the deep understanding, doesn't click into place until around 6 or 7. That's when they get gender constancy, the idea that gender is a permanent part of who you are. And this whole process has a name: gender typing. It's basically kids becoming little detectives, picking up clues from everywhere, from TV, from their parents, from other kids, about what things are associated with being male or female. And they pick it up fast. So you might be wondering, how does a kid's brain actually organize all this information? Well, that's where gender schema theory comes in. Think of a schema as a mental filing system. As soon as a child can label their own gender, they start creating these male and female files in their brain. And from them on, everything they see and hear gets sorted. This mental filing system then shapes what they pay attention to, what they remember, and how they see the world. All right, so we've talked about identity. Now let's shift gears and look inward at the emotional toolkit kids are building to deal with all those huge feelings they have. I mean, before you can control an emotion, you gotta know what it is, right? And this is where tools like the zones of regulation are just fantastic. You see these in classrooms everywhere. It gives kids a really simple, color-coded language to talk about their internal state. Green is calm and good to go, yellow is getting a little worried or silly, red is mad, and blue is sad. It's a game changer for emotional literacy. And once they can put a name to a feeling, you start to see them develop these amazing little strategies to manage it. And they're really practical things. If a movie gets too scary, they'll literally cover their eyes. You might hear them talking to themselves, saying things like, "It's okay, mommy will be right back." And by 4 or 5, they get pretty good at putting on a brave face, hiding feelings they know they're not supposed to show. Okay, listen up, because this next point is absolutely critical for anyone studying child development. We have to talk about the difference between shame and guilt. They can feel similar, but they are worlds apart in their impact. Shame is all about the self. It's the feeling of I am bad. And that feeling is toxic. It makes a kid want to hide. Guilt, on the other hand, is about behavior. It's the feeling of I did a bad thing. And that is so much more helpful. It motivates a kid to say sorry, to try and fix it, and to learn from the mistake. All right, we've spent a lot of time inside the child's head. Let's zoom out now and look at their first real social testing ground, the playground.
It's amazing to watch because social play isn't just a switch that flips on. It unfolds in these really clear, observable steps. Kids usually start off playing by themselves. Then they move into what's called parallel play. This is where two kids are playing with blocks right next to each other, but not really with each other. From there, they start simple interactions like handing a toy back and forth. And all of that builds up to the most advanced stage, cooperative play.
And this is the final boss of early childhood play, cooperative play. Look what's happening here. These kids aren't just randomly playing near each other. They have a shared mission. They're a team of firefighters. They have to talk. They have to negotiate roles. They have to work together to achieve their goal. This is where those heavy-duty social skills are getting a serious workout. Of course, social interaction isn't always smooth sailing. Let's talk about aggression. This graph tells a really interesting and, frankly, hopeful story. For the vast majority of kids, something like 82%, physical aggression really starts to drop off after age 3. Why? Well, they're getting better with words and with controlling their impulses. But for a small group, you can see that it's a much bigger struggle that continues on. And all of this, the emotions, the play, the conflicts, it all leads us to our final and maybe most important section, the role of the adults in the room. How does parenting shape a child's behavior and their moral compass? When we talk about parenting, researchers often boil it down to 4 main styles. And the key thing to remember is that we're not talking about a single good day or a bad day. It's about the overall climate in the home, the consistent pattern of how a parent interacts with their child. Okay, for anyone studying this chart is your best friend. It makes it so easy to understand. It all comes down to 2 things, warmth and control. If you have high warmth and high control, you get the authoritative style, and that one's consistently linked with the best outcomes. But look at high control and low warmth, that's authoritarian. Those kids might follow the rules, but it's often out of fear, not a real internalized sense of right and wrong. Then you have the uninvolved style, which is, you guessed it, low on both warmth and control. The parent is just checked out. They might be there physically, but they're not emotionally engaged. And in its worst form, this is pure neglect, which, as you can imagine, is incredibly damaging for a child's development. So if that's the framework, what actually works? What are the practical techniques? Well, one of the most powerful tools is something called induction. That just means explaining the why behind a rule. Instead of, because I said so, it's, we don't hit because it hurts our friends. That helps kids build empathy and their own internal moral compass. And you can see the other big ones here: routines, positive reinforcement, and using discipline that teaches rather than just punishes. So, as we wrap up our little study session here, what have we seen? We've seen the blueprint, right? We've seen how this incredible little person gets built through their own inner drive, through their messy, wonderful interactions with friends, and through the guidance of the adults around them. Which leaves all of us with a really big question. Knowing the blueprint, what will we choose to build?